Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing incredibly well, and I hope you're going to get that lovely refreshing drink because we're on part 2 of our story tonight. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification and the thumbs up, and if you haven't heard part 1, click on the description, and let's continue with part 2 of our story tonight. In truth, what happened over that devastatingly crushing period of my young life is all but an unwelcome, indistinct, hazy blur, that when I look back, it's like seeing things through a dark veil, as everything you don't want to remember can occupy the areas of your brain where your recollections can be buried under piles of cobwebs and dust, like the boxes long since forgotten in your attic. You can do that with the blistering memories of your past that can haunt your darkest nightmares. What I do remember with a vivid regret is that both of my parents could not bear to look at me. They were grieving Edward's tragic passing, but clearly blamed me for what had happened. Furthermore, they were even more incensed by my far-fetched, implausible claims, forbidding me to talk about them to anyone, lest people should think I needed sectioning. My parents failed to look at me during our family meals. My mother wouldn't engage in any conversations with me, willfully ignoring me, almost as if I was an ugly blot on the landscape that she'd like to pretend never existed. I knew they blamed me for Edward's death, vehemently believing that I was responsible for what had happened, and that it could so easily have been avoided if I'd only been paying attention. They were wrong about that. I could not bear the oppression, it was suffocating, of living under the same roof with them, when their love for me had dwindled and turned as sour as rancid milk. I remember overhearing my mother saying to my father, "You know what I wish, Curtis, is that our daughter actually had the decency to own up to what happened, instead of making up these nebulously sketchy stories. I feel as if I don't know her anymore. It's like when Edward died, so did our daughter. When I look at her, I feel so much hate. I know it's incongruous and irrational to feel like that towards your own daughter. It's also terribly, terribly unkind. But little Edward would be alive if our daughter had bothered to pay attention. And how can I ever forgive her for being so dreadfully irresponsible?"
"I feel much the same way, sweetheart. I can't look at our daughter in the eyes any more. I'm so livid."
I was riddled with feelings of guilt and shame, and beyond anything else I was grieving Edward's fortuitous loss, but my parents had no empathy towards me in this regard. At the time I was dating your father, and on seeing how grievously upset I was over what had transpired with little Edward, he actively encouraged me to move in with him to his parents' home.
"Move in with me, Sylvia. You know it's a good idea. My parents will not mind at all. On the contrary, they love you like family. They'll be delighted if you move in. You can't continue to live in a toxically condemning environment like this, where your blind-sighted parents have shackled you to the blame for your brother's death. It's ridiculous, and it's not healthy. The guilt they will inflict on you will eat you alive, and no one deserves that."
"And you? Do you believe my story, Ralph?" I asked him, "about the strange creatures I encountered at the stream? Because I promise you it's true. I'm not making any of it up."
"Whether I believe you or not, Sylvia, is neither here nor there, and it doesn't matter. And even if you did make those creatures up, your parents should be ashamed for treating you with such obvious disdain. You're their child, for God's sake. Have they not heard of unconditional love before? They've lost one child. Now they're pushing you away. They're well on their way to losing another child. And they have clearly not considered the ramifications of what they are doing."
"They'll be glad if I go," I said, the tears pouring down my cheeks, which Ralph lovingly wiped away with his hanky.
"Listen to me," he said kindly. "Everything is going to be fine. We're going to your parents' house. You'll pack your clothes up in a suitcase. You will tell them you're going for good, that you are moving in with me.
And that is ultimately what happened. I remember good old Ralph gave my parents a piece of his mind.
I'm bloody glad I don't have parents like you. The two of you should be ashamed of yourself,
he exclaimed, giving them dagger-like looks.
You don't have a monopoly on grief, you know. Surprise, surprise, your daughter is grieving too. She loved Edward with all her heart, but you've conveniently forgotten about that. All the two of you care about is wallowing in your self-indulgent pity. You both deserve each other. I hope you thoroughly enjoy your lonely, miserable, isolated existence. I'm here to pick up Sylvia's clothes for her. She's moving in with me and my parents, who will treat her like a human being, not a dog who fouled up the yard or tore the settee to shreds. Edward's death was not Sylvia's fault. Get over it. You're just looking for someone to blame, he growled.
My cantankerous father became furious. He gave Ralph a contemptuous look.
Get out of this house now, he barked. Forget about Sylvia's clothes. She's not getting anything. Nor are you welcome to cross the threshold of my home again. And by the way, you are welcome to my daughter. She's caused enough chaos around here already. We're glad to be rid of her, and we never want to see her ever again. Don't worry, said Ralph. Sylvia and I are going. We can buy her a brand new wardrobe. That's not a problem. But the trouble is you can't get new parents. But she's got my parents who will love her in your place.
I loved the way your father stuck up for me, and it was his determination to take care of me that made me fall in love with him. It was for that reason I married him, not realizing that further down the line we would grow apart. I will never forget his loyalty to me, though. I gave birth to you and have not been in touch with my parents since then, and when I went off with your father that day, they didn't give a toss. It was like they were so glad to finally be rid of me. It was from that moment on I decided that they were dead to me. When my mother told me her incredulous story, I was completely dumbfounded and disgusted with my grandparents for treating her so badly.
Did you make the story up, though, about the creatures at the stream? I asked her, so that they wouldn't blame you for what happened.
Goodness gracious me, no. My story is absolutely true. What I said happened did happen. The trouble is, my parents just would not believe me. I was to soon learn the creatures I saw were Bigfoots. I think the young one had a maternal instinct and fancied a baby of her own. I think she wanted to snatch Edward away to raise as her own baby, like a kid does with a doll. Her mother intervened to try and stop her, and when she grabbed her daughter's arm rather roughly, Edward just fell off her shoulders into the water from 8 feet off the ground and slammed into a rock. It was an unfortunate accident, but they never meant it to happen.
A Bigfoot? I gasped. You saw 2 Bigfoot? Are you being deadly serious? This is not a joke, is it?
That's what I assume they were, said my mother, based on the research I've done since then. Their emotions were so human, you know. They were devastated about the accident, so genuinely, and the large female apologized to me profusely about what had happened. Neither of them meant this to occur.
And your parents? What did they write to you in that letter just now?
My mother pulled out the letter from the manila envelope and read it to me.
My darling Sylvia, it is with a great deal of reluctance that I write this letter, for I am terribly afraid of how it might be received. For I would not blame you if you tore it up into shreds or burnt it up. It's been over 15 long years, and we have not heard a word from you since Edward's tragic passing. It has been very lonely without you in our lives, and we have missed you desperately. I hope you have it in your heart to forgive us for what happened all those years ago. I wouldn't blame you if you can't forgive us. You are our daughter. We love you with all of our hearts. I'm ashamed for how we treated you back then, blaming you very unfairly for Edward's fortuitous death, which I emphatically now believe was an accident. Losing Edward was a devastating blow to our lives, but we selfishly failed to consider that you too were also grieving the loss of your beloved brother, stroke cousin. We made his death all about us and excluded you from the fray. We were looking for someone to blame for what had happened to Edward. It was easy to pin the blame on you. You were 20 years old at the time and abandoned much of your social life in order to take care of little Edward. But we never considered that for a moment. We never appreciated the sacrifices you made on his behalf, as you loved little Edward as much as we did. I remember the day you left home for good to be with your boyfriend Ralph Finchley. I acted like a bear with a sore head. In truth, I must confess, I was devastated to see you go. A very broken man I was, but far too proud to admit as much, and so was your mother. I was to learn you got married, and later had a baby, and that we now have a grandchild, a boy. I would like to press upon you that even if you yourself never want to see us again, we would be so delighted to make our grandson's acquaintance. I imagine he must be about 15 years old now, or maybe 14, but we'd love to mend our bridges with you, Sylvia. But if you cannot find it in your heart to forgive us, please, I beg you, don't withhold our grandson from us. He is so welcome to visit us at any time he wishes. Stay with us for 3 weeks or so. We'd love to get to know him better. Once again, I am so sorry for what happened, and I ask you to forgive us. Your mother sends you her fondest love and deepest regrets. We miss you so dreadfully, and love you with all our hearts. Love, Dad.
I stared at my mother in confounded disbelief as she read the letter to me.
Your dad is sorry, isn't he, Mum? He's reaching out to you after all this time. It couldn't have been easy for him to put that letter together. He treated you unkindly, and he admits that, and he regrets it. Are you going to forgive him? I know it can't be easy for you.
I forgave my parents a long time ago, but I shan't forget how they treated me. That I simply can't do. More to the point, how do you feel about going to stay with your grandparents for a while? It's not a bad idea for you to meet them.
I'm not sure. I don't like the way they treated you, even though they're sorry. How can I stay with people who made you feel so bad?
Look, they were grieving at the time. Don't be so hard on them. They said things they probably regret. I promise you they're good people, with their hearts in the right place.
But they didn't believe your account of what happened to Edward. That would be upsetting for me if you didn't believe me about something.
My mother shrugged her shoulders. Who can blame them for doubting my story? Think about it. If you told me there was a fairy flying around our kitchen, would you expect me to believe you?
But this is different. Fairies aren't real, are they? And even a cynic has to admit that there is a distinct possibility that Bigfoot might actually exist.
Some people believe in fairies, my mother pointed out. In Ireland there are countless legends of the fae, people who claim to have had encounters with little people. At the time I expected my parents to believe me, but I should have judiciously kept my mouth shut. I could see the disappointment, the contempt, the pity, the disgust in my parents' eyes. They couldn't believe I had the blatant audacity and the impertinence to make up such an unlikely story. In truth, I should have told them what they wanted to hear, that Edward's death was a grievous accident, that he tripped, stumbling from a tree branch that overlooked the water, onto a rock, hitting his head. You see, the coroner discerned he'd fallen from a height, onto a hard surface, cracking his skull. They'd be more inclined to believe that story than my seemingly spurious, erroneous account. People believe what they want to believe, as sometimes the truth is incredibly uncomfortable to digest or to even wear, like a tight pair of jeans that just don't fit well. I think my outrageous claims only fueled their anger further, as they thought I didn't want to take responsibility for Edward's death. They'd have liked me to have said, "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry, Dad. It was all my fault. I'm to blame for what happened." I wasn't watching Edward closely enough. I think if I'd done that, the rift between us might not have been so stormy. They might have been more inclined to comfort me, but instead my words ruffled their feathers and set the cat among the pigeons.
Well, I think they should have known you better, shouldn't they? I mean, you didn't lie a lot when you were little, did you?
Oh, no, I was honest to a fault. That was part of my problem.
Well, there you are then. Why were they so quick to doubt you? That's all I'm saying.
And what I'm saying, son, is that I think you should meet your grandparents. You are their grandson, after all. I think it would be very nice if you went to visit them. If you're not happy, you can leave at once. Call a taxi. I'll give you some money so that you don't have to feel trapped, against your will, staying there, I mean. But I think you'll like them. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how very nice they actually are.
But why should I visit them?
Because they're your grandparents, of course. Don't make this about me. Give them a chance, will you? They'd love to get to know you. And despite everything, as I keep telling you, they're good people.
And you're not going to see them yourself?
I asked. I can't, said my mother. The wound is too deep. But you can tell them I forgive them. 3 months later, my grandparents had sent a taxi on my behalf to pick me up from my home in Nebraska and to take the 13-hour trip to Montana. The taxi was picking me up at 5 a.m, and if all being well, I might arrive at their farmhouse between 6, 7, or even 8 in the evening, depending on how good the traffic was, and of course taking in account the stops along the way. My mother stood in the driveway, wiping tears from her eyes, as the taxi driver loaded my suitcase into the back of his trunk. "Bye, sweetheart," said my mother, giving me an affectionate hug. "I'm so glad you're doing this. I think it's so important you get to know your grandparents. I really do. They're desperately excited to meet you. I know they are." I kissed my mother goodbye and reluctantly walked over to the taxi, climbing into the back and sinking into the seat. It had taken much persuasion on my mother's part to convince me to go and stay with my grandparents. I told myself I was doing it for her, which was why I eventually relented. The truth was, with no close family around me, the idea of meeting my grandparents on my mother's side of the family excited me. I was angry, of course, with their treatment of my mother, but I was appeased by their letter of apology that they had sent her. It had made them appear all the more human, vulnerable to making mistakes like the rest of us do. In my humble opinion, I also had to remind myself that hurting people hurt people. One of our teachers at school taught us that lesson. At the time, the school was dealing with a bullying problem. She explained the frail complexities of the human condition and how we respond and react when we're hurting. It would seem the way my grandparents reacted to their son's death was quite understandable, but their brusque treatment of my mother was both unkind and cruel. I had decided that I would give my grandparents a fighting chance, but if they said one bad word about my mother, I would take the next taxi home. I was nervous about meeting them, of course I was, but I tried not to think about it as I sat in the back of the taxi with my earphones on. I could see the chatty, very talkative Bangladesh taxi driver who talked in pidgin English, glancing at me through his curious brown, bird-like eyes through the visor mirror, in the hope that the two of us would soon engage in a hearty conversation. Granted, he was nice and convivial enough, but I didn't want to talk, so I shut him off by listening to music. It was getting cramped in the back of the taxi, sitting in one position for hours on end, and even though we made a few stops along the way, I couldn't wait to stretch my legs again. At 15, I was already just under 6 foot tall, with gangly long legs like my father, and was becoming restlessly uncomfortable. Later in the early evening, I glanced out of the passenger side window, smudging my nose against the pane, as I tried to discern my environment that was cloaked in obscurity. Instead, I was met by the ambiguous shadows of tall, lofty trees, rambling meadows, rugged embankments, all swathed in a tenebrific, misty veil that swallowed up the definitive features and details of the landscape. In truth, everything looked like black, dense cardboard cutouts set against a coffee-coloured backwash. It was difficult to make anything out at all. There were no street lights in this rural part of the world, and farmhouses were few and far between, set wide apart, their bright lights glowing like blazing headlights intrusively through the looming shadows. I was told that we would be there soon. Brace yourself, I was told. The roads around here would be bumpy. Of course, the taxi driver wasn't wrong about that. The taxi trundled down rocky roads, its tyres bouncing up and down the uneven cracks, bumps and potholes, until finally we came to an open iron gate. There was a signpost attached to the wooden railing, which read Rosewood Ramble. I knew I was now moments away from meeting my grandparents, and there were butterflies flapping away furiously in my belly. My hands began to twitch nervously, and beads of perspiration anointed my upper lip. While I wanted to stretch my legs more than anything in the world, another part of me was desirous to tap the taxi driver on the back and tell him I'd changed my mind and to please hurry back home to Nebraska. I felt as if there was a frog in the back of my throat as we neared our approach to the farmhouse where my mother had grown up as a young girl. So this was it. I saw my grandparents standing expectantly on the wraparound porch that hugged the entrance of their large, symmetrical, double-story farmhouse. I couldn't see them clearly. The moonlight was so faint, the stars reticent. My grandparents just looked like two stoic silhouettes standing there with their bright eyes pinned on the taxi. I suddenly felt very self-conscious as I hesitantly opened the door when the taxi came to a grinding halt, and a plump woman wearing a floral skirt and white blouse came bounding towards me with her arms outstretched and her voice rapturously animated. "Oh, my word! Oh, my word! We finally meet our grandson! Oh, I can't believe it! You must be Joe!" she said, hugging me tightly. "It's so good to meet you finally! You have no idea how much I've longed for this moment. My word, you're so tall! Oh, it's lovely to see you." My grandfather attempted to shake my hand, but his wife said, "Goodness gracious, Curtis, this is your grandson. How about giving him a nice big hug?" I was rather overawed by the ebullient, enthusiastic welcome I'd received from both of my grandparents. I wasn't used to being the centre of anyone else's world, beyond my mother's. I felt warmly welcomed into their abode as they ushered me indoors. I could hear the taxi drive away as rubber tyres swished against the stones. My grandfather led me up to the sweeping walnut staircase to a bedroom he claimed had belonged to my mother when she was a little girl. He paused uncomfortably in the doorway for a moment. "This was where your mother's room was when she was a girl. Everything's much the same as she left it, although we've kept it clean over the years and changed the sheets, of course. I thought it would suit you to stay here." It was strange to be in my mother's bedroom, and it was almost as if I could feel her energy, as there were pop idol posters on the walls, and pictures of my mother as a girl with her friends displayed in a big collage where the weathered photographs that had been stuck to the cardboard were now peeling away at will. I noticed even my mother's teenage clothes were still on one side of the wardrobe. They smelt of mildew, and some of her woolen sweaters had been ruthlessly devoured by moths, while another side had been cleared of her things to make way for my clothes. 1 week later, it had been quite an adjustment settling into my grandparents' home, but to give them their due, they had made me feel incredibly welcome from the very beginning, and thankfully openly discussed the elephant in the room, my mother, which I was glad about, for it relieved any awkwardness between us. My grandfather looked pained when he lit his pipe and inhaled the aromatic tobacco, which he puffed out in a pillar of white smoke. I knew he was smoking his pipe to obviously allay his nerves. My grandfather was 6 foot tall, but I think he'd shrunk over the years, unless my mother exaggerated his height, which I highly doubt. His body was thin and lanky, although he had a little girth hanging over his belt. His hands, knobbly and arthritic, were weathered by time, and his skin had not escaped the damaging effects of hours spent out in the Montana sunshine, for it was heavily wrinkled, but his bright blue eyes peered at me sorrowfully from behind hooded lids, revealing a deep regret and sober reflection. "Has your mother told you why we all fell out? It was most unfortunate. If I could go back in time, I would do things very differently. Oh, for the benefit of hindsight, there is so much I regret. Mum told me about Edward's death. It was a very sad story," I said.
I know it was a dreadful time for all of us, I'm afraid. I can't express what a dreadful time it was for all of us. We did not take the news well. I'm afraid we were most unkind, grievously unfair to your mother at the time, said some thorny, barbed things that we both regret. My teacher says it's because hurt people hurt people. That's why you reacted the way you did. I couldn't have put it better myself, son. I think that's exactly what happened. Don't you, dear? He said, looking at his wife tenderly. My grandmother Ella nodded. She was a plump woman, and this helped her look younger for her years, as her well-upholstered face had kept the wrinkles at bay. She had brown, bear-like eyes and a gentle mother-duck-like energy. "It's true," said my grandmother, letting out a huge sigh, that revealed to me just how much she really did regret their treatment of my mother at the time. They really were incredibly sorry. "I have so many regrets. Oh, I do. I can't even bear to think of the way I treated your mother. I was so outrageously unreasonable. Oh, if I could go back in time, I would do everything so differently. But I can't cry over spilt milk, can I? What's done is done." As time passed, one lazy lackadaisical day stretched out happily into another, and I began to feel quite content living with my grandparents, who began to find a special place in my heart, for it was impossible not to love them, as my mother had claimed they were indeed very good people. "I want to show you something," my grandmother said to me one day, and that was when she led me to a single gravestone, jutting through the long grass, covered with pretty displays of fresh roses. "I come here every day to talk to little Edward. This is his grave. You may not realize this, but your bedroom actually overlooks his burial plot." I stared at the gravestone, feeling a deep sadness descend over me. This child's death had tragically torn a family's life apart. I was sure that little Edward would have hated this to happen, for he was the kind of boy that wanted to throw a fish back into the water. He hated hurting any living thing. He would have despised any family discord. My grandmother's eyes filled with tears, and I reached over to hug her, holding her warmly in my arms. "You're so sweet, Joel. Do you know you really remind me of little Edward? You look just like him in many regards. When I first saw you get out of that taxi when you arrived here, I thought I was seeing double, or a ghost. The likeness between you and Edward is uncanny. It even threw your grandfather when he first laid his eyes on you. You know they say things get easier with the passing of time, but I still feel raw about what happened to poor Edward. And I'm grieved, of course, with my fallout from Sylvia. If you have children one day, Joel, don't allow any petty things to drive a wedge between you and your children. Take it from me, it's not worth it." She leaned down to the gravestone and picked something up in her hand. The only way I can describe it, as like a grass bracelet that had been woven superbly with tiny stitches. My grandmother examined it closely and then handed it to me. "What do you think it is?" she asked me. "I have to tell you that ever since Edward's death 15 years ago, I've been getting these bracelets in spring, usually one a week, and then the rest of the year they just stop like that. Someone is putting them here. It's been an ongoing enigmatic mystery that I've never been able to solve. But there you are. Strange things in life can happen. I like to think it's a sign from Edward, telling us he's looking down upon us." "Can I have it?" I asked, admiring the grass bracelet and putting it on my hand for size. It was a perfect fit. "Of course you can have it," said my grandmother. "So you're saying you only receive these grass bracelets during the spring?" "That's right. Isn't it odd?" "It's very interesting. It must mean something. Nothing just happens by chance, you know." I examined the bracelet closely, which I clandestinely believed came from the Bigfoots. Not that I told my grandmother as much. Could one of the Bigfoots that had witnessed Edward's tragic passing be leaving little grass bracelets by the grave during the spring, as their way of remembering the tragedy, in the same way we might lay flowers down at the grave of a loved one? My mother had described the Bigfoots as so human, possessing genuine emotions. Maybe the death of Edward had caused them great distress. Tuesday night,
the 16th of May. I went to bed that night, realizing that my spring break holiday with my grandparents was soon coming to an end, and that made me feel very sad. I had telephoned my mother regularly to tell her what a great time I was having with her parents, and how much they deeply regretted their falling out with her, and wished to make amends. I also told her about the little bracelets I had found at little Edward's gravesite, and how my grandmother claimed that she received these grass bracelets only during the spring. There had been a long pause at the end of the phone, and my mother let out an audible gasp. "Oh, my word! It's got to be the Bigfoots! Those grass bracelets must come from them." "Are you sure?" I asked her. "Absolutely. There is no doubt about this in my mind. When I encountered those Bigfoots 15 years ago, I have to tell you both of them were wearing about 2 or 3 grass bracelets on their wrists. My guess is they're delivering the bracelets to the grave in spring, as it was a time of year when Edward died. It's possibly their way of remembering him. I told you they were benevolent creatures with very big hearts. The 16th of May, which is this Tuesday, is the anniversary of Edward's death. Maybe the Bigfoots will put a grass bracelet on the gravestone again, on that date. It's just a thought." It would seem that both my grandparents had not forgotten the anniversary of Edward's death, and it was celebrated in the farmhouse with a special tea and dinner. I couldn't help thinking my mother was right. Would the Bigfoots return to leave another bracelet at the gravestone? The idea excited me, as I fancied encountering the idiosyncratic creatures for myself. I promptly decided I'd keep a vigil at the window, which overlooked little Edward's grave. If there was any activity around the gravesite at night, I was sure to see it, I thought, even though I willed myself to stay awake that night, as I kept walking over to the window and peeking out, hoping I might see 2 ambiguous shadowy creatures creeping towards the grave. But that did not happen, and my eyelids soon grew heavy, not only with disappointment, but tiredness. I tried to fight off the urge to sleep, but I must have lost that battle, as I drifted off. I don't know how long I actually slept for, but I suddenly woke up with a start. I hadn't actually heard anything to grab my attention, but I remembered my vigil, and I was exceedingly annoyed with myself for having failed to remain awake. I certainly wouldn't make a good night watchman, I thought. The Bigfoots must have come and gone already. I cursed myself climbing out of bed, trotting over to the bedroom window, certain that I would not see a thing. It was a magnificently beautiful night, and the whole of my grandparents' front yard was washed in a pearly luminescence, while the silvery stars twinkled brightly. Then I saw 3 ponderous figures moving towards Edward's grave, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was seeing the Bigfoots my mother had told me about. But there were 3 of them, not 2, one considerably smaller than the other, that looked to be no more than a child. I had the foresight to go to bed in all my clothes, including my sneakers, for I knew I would need to move fast on my feet, and that is exactly what I did. I literally ran down the staircase, trying to be as discreet as I possibly could. Before I knew it, I was slipping cautiously out of the kitchen door and creeping stealthily along the walls of the house. There was a cool breeze blowing that nipped my neck with an icy chill, as if cold fingers were touching me. The night was filled with the happy trills of crickets and frogs. The outside light on the kitchen door was being serenaded by a plethora of mops that were circling its globe. I was afraid of scaring away the Bigfoots, so I clandestinely bounded very cautiously and very carefully from one tree to another, until I finally found myself behind the old cherry blossom tree that was only a hair's breadth away from the grave. I could see 3 Herculean dark blobs of black gathered around the gravesite, paying their respects to Edward. They appeared to be chanting something in a strange language that I couldn't understand. I couldn't see them clearly, only their silhouettes, their ponderous large shoulders, their pyramid-shaped heads, their overlong arms. They were so obscure. All of a sudden the little Bigfoot, with his overlong arm, pointed in my direction, and that was when I realized that my presence had been duly noted. One of the Bigfoots, a very large one, began to walk towards me. She was swinging her arms. My mother had told me that the creatures were benign, that I had nothing to fear, but in the looming dark shadows of the dusky twilight that cast everything in a foreboding gloom, this towering, humongous creature moving towards me was more than a little intimidating for my little heart to take, which was thundering against my rib cage, my whole body trembling like a jelly. Suddenly I became so desperately afraid. I so wanted to run away from the cherry blossom tree to the safety of my grandparents' home. I tried to move away, but it was as if I became rooted to the spot, so that I could barely move a single muscle. Then there she was, standing, looking at me, her human-like face registering surprised. "Kukotantui, abakita." "You look so like him," she said to my head. For a moment I was completely bewildered and confounded. Did the Bigfoot actually talk to me? But then I remembered my mother telling me that they had talked to her. I was baffled that anyone could communicate like this so eloquently, but I understood exactly what the creature was saying, as everything was translated into my mind in English. "Sorry, I look like who?" "Tila twana suika." "The boy, of course," she said sorrowfully. "Tuna twa." "The boy that died." "Tila kwala sifokua, kila noto walakshoanaka." "The boy's grave we're visiting. You must be related to him by blood." "Itwala sikaltakwata, ikant shakalo, o fogobolanisi." I'd like to apologize for what happened. My mother was furious with me. It was all my fault. I wanted him, you see. My mother said he was not mine to keep, but I wouldn't listen. The boy fell out of my arms, well, off my shoulders actually. He hit his head on the rock. I knew I was to blame. It's been hard to forgive myself for what happened. I was always naughty when I was young. My mother knew best, but I never listened. "Ifant kolo shoka, igali nalakotonopa, isifaki latwina, isilo no kolamasi." I come here when the trees break out into blossom, to pay my respects every year. "I leave him grass bracelets," she said, pointing to the one I was wearing. "One like that. I came here with my partner to stand over the grave, and with my child. I've seen the boy's spirit around here many times. He's a happy boy. He's at peace, you know. He loves the grass bracelets I leave behind. It's my small way of making amends."
"Please don't be sad. Accidents happen. You need to forgive yourself," I told her.
"Ikatwana sifo, hokola pasi, ashakana kwalinako, avolopotalinasi." "And to think I thought your kind were not wise. I've forgiven myself, so has the little boy forgiven me. But I shan't forget. It's important to honour the memories of those that have passed to the world of souls. They must always know that they are not forgotten. That's very important, you know." She handed me a grass bracelet. "You keep it this time. The boy wants you to have it. You may not see him, but his spirit is here. He's smiling at you. He's very sad about the disputes in your family, and is begging you to fix them." "I'll be off now," she said. "Godspeed." I watched the Bigfoot gliding back to the gravestone. She chatted to the 2 other Bigfoots, which I knew was her male partner and child. Then I watched them, glancing over at me, giving me a nod, and finally gliding away into the woodgrove, until they were all but gone. To cut a long story short, in time, my mother did forgive her own parents for their brusque treatment of her all those years ago, and she and my grandparents made up for their differences. So we're now one big happy family again. I also took the bull by the horns and invited myself to stay at my father's house, and have now got 3 half-siblings, I'm glad to say. I gave them all a grass bracelet as a gift, which they love, and swear brings them good luck, but I have never told them that those bracelets are made by a Bigfoot. Some things are best kept under cloak and dagger. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.